Hi, my name is Shannon Self. Welcome to the Delaware Public Health District Food Safety Basics course. This is an introductory course designed to help train food employees in the fundamentals of food safety. We're going to talk about 4 keys to food safety throughout this presentation. And the reason for this is if any of these things go wrong within your facility, it has the potential to make somebody sick. So we're going to talk about personal hygiene and hand washing, proper temperatures to keep food safe, prevention of cross-contamination, and proper cleaning and sanitizing of equipment and utensils. We are going to talk about personal hygiene. This includes hand washing, employee illness, and proper clothing. First of all, when we practice good personal hygiene, you want to make sure when you work with food, if you're sick, stay home. Viruses and bacteria are commonly found in human feces. And if we shed those viruses and bacteria in our human feces while we're sick at work and don't wash our hands properly, then we can make people sick. Also, when you're washing your hands, make sure you're washing your hands at the right time and washing them in the right place. Meaning, we want you to wash your hands after they've been contaminated or before you start work, and we want you to wash your hands only in a designated hand washing sink. As I mentioned in the last slide, you want to wash your hands before you start your shift. But there's other times throughout your shift that you want to wash your hands as well. Before putting on gloves to handle anybody's food, between tasks such as running the cash register and then handling food, after taking a break, after taking out the trash, after handling chemicals of any kind, and after coughing or sneezing or using the restroom. Also, it's very important to wash your hands only in a designated hand sink. If you wash your hands in a 3-compartment sink or a mop sink, you stand the chance of contaminating your hands even further instead of getting them clean. You should know how to wash your hands, but let's go over that real quick. You want to make sure you're using warm running water, lather with your soap, rub and scrub for 15 to 20 seconds, and then rinse and dry your hands properly using either a paper towel or an air dryer. Right now, everybody's using hand sanitizers. Well, hand sanitizers are great if you're in a situation where you can't wash your hands. But in a food service operation, you always have to wash your hands before you use a hand sanitizer. They can only be applied to clean, washed hands and cannot be used in place of hand washing. Let's talk about glove use in a food operation. First of all, latex cannot be used in any food operation in Ohio. This is because of people with severe latex allergies. Also, gloves must be worn at these specific times. Anytime your hands will be in direct contact with ready-to-eat foods. Examples include hot dog buns, pizza slices, bulk chips, anything that's going to go directly into someone's mouth. If a person has a cut or wound on their hand, they must have a glove covering that wound after it has been properly bandaged. If a person has fake nails, they have to wear gloves so that the nails don't fall off into somebody's food. And if a person serves a predominantly highly susceptible population, gloves must be worn when washing produce. Remember, gloves are disposable, so don't shimmy out of them and shimmy back into them. When you take them off, throw them in the trash. Gloves also have to be changed between tasks. And gloves do not give you magic hands, so don't wear them for everything. Once you're done with them, take them off, throw them away, and wash your hands before you move on to the next task. Employees are expected to keep their hair covered when working with food. This can help prevent hair from getting into a customer's order. Hair can be covered with hats, nets, or other forms of clothing. Now let's move on to proper temperatures to keep food safe. First, let's talk about the types of foods that are most commonly linked with foodborne illnesses. We call these time temperature controlled for safety foods, or TCS foods. Examples can include cooked meats, cooked rice, cut tomatoes, cut lettuce or spinach, cooked vegetables, and cheese. This list is not all inclusive. If you have questions about TCS foods, ask your inspector. They'll be able to tell you. Time temperature control for safety foods require time and/or temperature control to prevent bacterial growth. If TCS foods are handled improperly, they can allow bacteria to grow to a point where it can make somebody sick. So what do those bacteria need to grow? Well, they need what we call Fat Tom. They need food, acidity, time, temperature, oxygen, or lack of, and moisture. Time and temperature are the two items that you can control in your facility. So, when we're talking about controlling time and temperature in our facility, we want to make sure that we keep our foods out of the temperature danger zone for extended periods of time. So that basically means keeping our hot foods hot and our cold foods cold. We want our hot foods to be held at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or greater, and our cold foods held at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or less. Temperatures that are in between those two allow for rapid bacterial growth to the point where it could make somebody sick if left uncontrolled for a long period of time. So how do you ensure that your foods are at the correct temperature? Well, you always want to use a calibrated thermometer. Using your hand or just saying it's boiling does not mean that the food is safe. So, commonly in your facility, you're going to find two types of thermometers, a bimetal stem thermometer or a digital thermometer. Both of these thermometers may periodically need to be calibrated. When you calibrate your thermometer, we recommend using the ice point method. You take your thermometer and a slurry of ice and water, and it should read 32 degrees Fahrenheit. If it does not, you would calibrate your thermometer according to the package instructions. The food that's coming into your facility should be safe and wholesome. In order for you to make sure that that's correct, you need to monitor receiving temperatures. Frozen foods should be received frozen with no signs of freezing and thawing. Refrigerated foods, refrigerated TCS foods specifically, must be received at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or less, and cooked TCS foods, if you're receiving them hot, must be received at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or more. If any of these items are coming in at the wrong temperature, you should reject them. You have to thaw food out safely in order to prevent bacterial growth. Notice, sitting on the counter is not an option. So, in order to thaw food out safely, you can do it by putting it under cool running water under 70 degrees. You can do it in the refrigerator over a long period of time. You can also do it as part of the cooking process, such as when you cook frozen chicken or hamburgers. And if you need to use the microwave to thaw items out, it must be cooked immediately afterwards. Different TCS foods require different temperatures in order to kill pathogens of concern. As you can see, poultry, stuffed meats, stuffed pasta, thick soups or stews, foods that are cooked using a microwave, or if we're reheating for hot holding, all require a minimum internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Ground beef, ground pork, minced or ground fish require a minimum temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit. Whole fish, whole beef, whole pork, raw shell eggs for immediate service require a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit, and cooked vegetables or grains that will be held hot require 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Any foods that have been cooked properly and are going to be held hot need to be held at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or greater at all times. If you have to cool foods in your facility as part of your process, you need to do it rapidly to prevent bacterial growth. In order to prevent bacterial growth, you need to cool your foods from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours. And then once you've reached 70, you have an additional 4 hours to reach 41 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason for this is because bacteria like to grow more rapidly in warmer temperatures, so the time period of 2 hours cannot be exceeded. If it is exceeded, the food must be thrown away. You do not get more than 6 hours to completely cool your TCS products down from 135 to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Foods do not typically cool very well just by putting them in the refrigerator. We recommend that you use any of the following in order to rapidly cool your foods. You can use an ice bath, an ice wand. You could portion your product into shallow pans that are less than 2 inches in depth. You can add ice or cold water as an ingredient, or if you have a blast chiller, we recommend you use that. If you need to reheat your TCS foods, You have to do that rapidly if you're hot holding it for later service. An example of this might be soup that you cooked the day before and cooled down properly, and then are going to reheat and place in a hot well for the remainder of the day. If you are going to put your TCS foods in a hot well, they must be heated to 165 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours, and then held hot at 135 degrees Fahrenheit for the remainder of the service. If you're going to reheat individual portions for immediate service, they can be reheated to any temperature because they will be consumed immediately. Ready-to-eat TCS foods held refrigerated for more than 24 hours must be marked with the date at the time the package is open or the food is prepared. Even at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or less, a bacteria named Listeria can still grow at a slow rate. Examples of these types of foods include open packages of hot dogs, deli meat, or house-prepared sauces and salad dressings. You have 7 days to use or lose the product. If you work in a facility that serves highly susceptible populations, such as hospitals, nursing homes, or preschools, there are certain rules that you also need to follow. No raw or undercooked animal foods can be served. Only pasteurized juices may be served. Gloves must be worn when washing raw fruits and vegetables. Time in lieu of temperature cannot be used for TCS foods. What we mean by this is you're intentionally taking the food out of temperature control and keeping it there for no more than 4 hours. Foods served to patients in isolation or quarantine cannot be reserved to other patients. The reason for these rules is because people in a highly susceptible population have a weakened or underdeveloped immune system, and they can get sick rather easily. Now let's talk about ways to prevent contamination of food. There are 3 types of contamination that we're concerned with in a facility. Chemical contamination can happen accidentally when cleaning or sanitizing. Physical contamination, such as broken glass, Band-Aids, pills, can fall into food. And there's biological contamination, such as bacteria, viruses, and parasites. If you practice proper personal hygiene, as we discussed earlier in the presentation, you can help prevent biological contamination. Proper personal hygiene includes washing your hands frequently, no bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods, covering your coughs and sneezes, make sure you wear clean clothing to work, staying home when you're sick, and if you must taste food, no double dipping. During food storage, there should be special care taken to prevent contamination from the premises. Store chemicals separately, away from food. Keep damaged or recalled food segregated until it can be disposed or returned. Do not store food on the floor. Keep foods covered when not actively using or cooling the food, and only store food in approved areas. Bathrooms, mechanical rooms, and chemical rooms are not approved areas. Cross-contamination is defined as the transfer of bacteria or viruses from one food or surface to another. Cross-contamination can happen during storage, preparation, and service. In the example on the left, raw animal product is stored above ready-to-eat foods. If the raw animal product leaks onto foods below, this can cause cross-contamination. Ideal storage of foods is shown on the right. Poultry is always stored below all other foods. Ready-to-eat foods should always be stored above any raw animal product. Cross-contamination can also be prevented by proper cleaning and sanitizing of food surfaces, such as between tasks when we're switching from raw to ready-to-eat foods or between different raw species. You also need to make sure you're changing your gloves and washing your hands when required. Use only clean, sanitized utensils when you're handling food. Store wiping cloths properly, not on the counter. Keep your sanitizing solution fresh. Don't forget about ice. It can be easily contaminated. Always use clean scoops and not a glass. Keep the lids closed over bins to prevent things from accidentally falling in. Inspect and clean machines as necessary to prevent growth of mold or mildew. And if you have a water emergency, such as a boil advisory, make sure you turn the ice machines off. It's important for you to understand proper methods of cleaning and sanitizing. So what's the difference between cleaning and sanitizing? Cleaning is the process of removing food and soil from a surface, like dirty plates. Sanitizing is the process of reducing the number of microorganisms on a clean surface to a safe level. You can't sanitize a dirty surface. All food contact surfaces must be sanitized, and effective sanitizing can only be done after a proper wash and a clear rinse. So if you're using a 3-compartment sink, here's an example. You would rinse, scrape, or soak your dishes, wash them with detergent and water, rinse them in clear, warm water, and then dip them in a sanitizing solution according to manufacturer's directions. You would also have to allow them to air dry. You cannot towel dry your dishes. Sanitizing of food contact surfaces can be done in one of two ways. It can be done with hot water or with chemicals. Either way, there needs to be a way to test that the sanitizer is working properly. Using the hot water method in a dish machine, the surface of the plate must reach 160 degrees Fahrenheit. This can be tested using an irreversible maximum registering thermometer or thermotape. Chemicals in a 3-compartment sink or dish machine must have a minimum of 50 parts per million of chlorine or 200 to 400 parts per million of quaternary ammonium. Chemicals that are manually applied to surfaces such as cutting boards or slicers must be 100 parts per million of chlorine or 200 to 400 parts per million of quaternary ammonium. These levels of chemicals can be tested only using test strips that are compatible with the type of sanitizer you're using. Food contact surfaces in a facility must be cleaned and sanitized to prevent bacterial growth. Dishes and utensils for customers must be cleaned and sanitized before and after each use. Food contact surfaces in the kitchen must be cleaned every 4 hours if those contact surfaces are held at room temperatures. Examples of this include slicers, cutting boards, knives, and prep tables. You can clean a container when it is empty if it only holds non-TCS foods. If containers or scoops are being used with TCS foods and held at the proper temperatures, such as 41 degrees Fahrenheit or less, or 135 degrees Fahrenheit or greater, they can be cleaned at the end of the day. Any non-food contact surfaces, such as outsides of refrigerators, can be cleaned as needed to prevent soil buildup and pest attraction. If you have any other questions about this presentation, or if you would like to inquire about future trainings, please feel free to contact me at 740-203-2071, or you can email me at sself@delawarehealth.org. Remember, food safety begins with you. Actually, no, it begins with F, but you are an important factor. Thank you.